We are continuing our lectures by eminent theorists and philosophers with one of the Hannah Arendt professor, actually, of this school, which somebody who is here for the second time and who is fitting very well to us. As you see, she is a very courageous thinker. As we have heard yesterday, also very systematic. And she has also the advantage that she speaks German. Because you might have noticed that all our all our professors here, our theorists, all of them, I think even but you, understand at least German. Because without that, I did not make it a criteria, but it just happens this way, and I'm happy about that. So anyway, still, we are also happy to hear very good English for a change. So, please welcome Judith Butler.
Thank you very much. If I speak at this level, you can hear me? At this volume?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I wanted to speak to you this evening on Primo Levi. This is a paper that I am working on right now. It's an in-progress paper. I thought I might use this occasion to give you this piece in progress and get some of your thoughts. You'll see at the very end I pose some questions that I hope you might be able to help me think through. And so the paper is provisionally called Primo Levi for the Present. In my recent work, at least some of it, I've sought to understand what it is to give an account of oneself when one is not fully transparent to oneself, when one cannot always relate one's life in narrative form, and when the social and linguistic conditions of one's own existence are not always fully understood or available to a narrative account. Although I'm certainly not against narrative in any strong sense. I think, frankly, we all need to be able to give some accounts of ourselves in order to live, even to survive. I think it's equally implausible, though, to demand that a life always conform to the criterion of a narrative or a story. Of course, one gives an account of oneself always to someone, and so it seems to be that the account is not only an account that I give of myself and to myself, it is an effort to make oneself known, and it requires a structure of address as well as an other for whom my account might matter in some way. Indeed, others sometimes ask us to give an account of why we have done what we have done, and we seek to make ourselves understood, if we do, in order to sustain the relationship between oneself and the other. Indeed, giving an account is rarely a solitary act, since even if I seek to give an account only to myself, I would have to act as both speaker and audience to the story at issue. The account still requires its recipient, and there is still a question of whether I can offer the kind of account that might satisfy the narrative requirements of a full and seamless story. Let's assume that not only in the cases of extreme trauma that beset an author like Primo Levi, but in the course of life itself, there are gaps or fissures in the accounts that we give, and that we have no account to give of why that part of life cannot be recalled or given in narrative form. This becomes especially acute when we ask others or ourselves to give an account in order precisely to hold them accountable for their actions in an effort to locate or assign responsibility for a set of actions that have led to injurious consequences. In such cases, we depend upon the capacity of one another to give an account in order to determine accountability, and when and where that capacity breaks down, we turn to other kinds of evidence to determine the agency of the action at issue. In courts of law, such a juridical notion of responsibility is operative and clearly must be. But are we right to import such a model of responsibility into non-juridical domains of human relationality? Could it be that there are other ethical values that are lost when the juridical notion of accountability becomes equated with our understanding of responsibility more generally. I ask this question because it would seem that if traumatic events make giving an account difficult or impossible, then it is important to maintain some compassion toward this inability to narrate the issue of agency. Moreover, the I, who would make itself into the inaugural moment of a sequence of acts, is one who places itself at the center of the action in question when sometimes a series of circumstances and actors are acting upon the scene at once, all of which are acted on by other circumstances and actors, the history of which cannot be fully known or narrated at the time, if ever. Indeed, it would seem to me that there is some humility to be valued in recognizing that one's actions are not always completely and utterly originating with the I that one is, and that correspondingly there is some forgiveness to offer to others and perhaps to oneself, when if it becomes clear that giving a full account of oneself is impossible. Primo Levi's books are, I would suggest, complex, but in at least two of them, Survival in Auschwitz and The Drowned and the Saved, he is clearly trying not only to relay the life and death of those in the camps with him, but also to determine his own action and agency in that context. Although there are times when he simply maintains that there were victims and there were executioners, there are also times where he points to what is called the gray zone, where lines of accountability are more difficult to ascertain. In that gray zone, he points to the actions that prisoners took under constraint, indeed under the threat of death, and seeks to show that though they participated in activities that could be said to maintain the death and labor camps, their actions were in large part coerced. He portrays yet other prisoners, though, who became the notorious capos, and identifies them as overreaching, zealous, and sadistic as they entered the ranks of the SS and entered into collaborationist practices that he finds morally repugnant. There is also the question throughout these texts of where Levi himself might be. And it seems to me that he vacillates between holding himself accountable for surviving, seeing his survival as evidence of a certain guilt, and insisting that the responsibility for the destruction of human lives in the camps resides with the SS and the explicit collaborators and not himself. At one point, Levi claims that inmates made the assumption that if they were arrested and imprisoned, they must be guilty of something, and so lived their days in an effort to expiate a guilt that was nameless and without any basis in reality. So the very fact that they were imprisoned implied that there must have been a crime, and implied as well that there must have been some guilt over this crime, even though the crime was never stated and the guilt never based itself in a stated crime. Indeed, the reason he gives for why suicide rates were so high among survivors after the camps were liberated, higher after the camps were liberated than within the camps apparently, was that there was no longer the opportunity to expiate their guilt that the camps provided. And at this point, he argues as well that the guilt of survival became overwhelming. Now, sometimes it appears that Levi understands that it's only by accident that he himself survived. For instance, he came down with an illness that landed him in the infirmary at the time when the rest of his barracks were taken out for a death march in the last spring of the war, leading to his inadvertent survival and rescue. At other times, though, it would appear that Levi thought that he survived at the expense of someone else. And this thought is clearly unbearable, the thought that he should survive when another could not. Understanding that, it would seem, he survived in the place of another, and so experienced his survival as an illegitimate usurpation of another person's place in life. Now, one can see how this latter kind of reasoning would lead to a belief that one's survival is, in effect, the cause of another's death, and even lead to a wish for one's own death as a way of compensating for a sense that one's own life is a murderous event. My fear in reading Levi's biographies and writings is that he did suffer from that sense of baseless but acute guilt over survival as such, but this is merely speculation on my part.